At the dawn of the century, in the heart of the green and mountainous region of Nursia, in ancient Italy, a child destined to be a beacon of light in the darkness of his time came into the world. This child, Benedict, would grow to trace a path of holiness and devotion that would resonate through the centuries, becoming a pillar of the Christian faith. But before we continue delving into the fascinating life of Saint Benedict and explore the depth of his spiritual legacy, I would like to invite you to become an active part of our community at Sancta Sanctorum. The creation of this content that seeks to illuminate and share the richness of the lives of saints is possible thanks to your support. If you find value and spirituality in these stories, I encourage you to subscribe to our channel, like our videos, and share them with those who, like you, seek inspiration in stories of faith and devotion. Your collaboration is essential so that we can continue with this work of spreading the history and teachings of such emblematic and luminous figures as Saint Benedict. Together, we can continue building a space of encounter, reflection, and spiritual growth. From his earliest years, Benedict showed himself to be different. His childhood, wrapped in simplicity of rural life, was also a reflection of a deep inner search. His soul, disturbed by worldly clamors and thirsting for a more authentic communion with the divine, would soon lead him to abandon his studies and comfort his home to enter the silence of the mountains of Subiaco. As a young hermit, he found in the solitude of a cave a perfect setting for deep introspection and prayer, where his spirit was forged in a crucible of contemplation and fasting. But Benedict's retreat would not be an end in itself. His light could not be hidden, and soon others sought his guidance, attracting those who yearned to follow his steps toward God. Although initially reluctant, Benedict accepted being an abbot, establishing communities where prayer and work were intertwined in a dance of living faith. These communities would be the foundations of what would later be known as Western Monasticism, with the monastery of Monte Cassino rising as a bastion of spirituality and learning under his direction. In this sanctuary of peace, Benedict embodied the wisdom of his eremitic experience in a rule that would bear his name. The Rule of Saint Benedict, with its call to moderation, balance, and community life under the guidance of an abbot, would become the cornerstone of monastic life in the West. This document, imbued with a deep sense of humanity and compassion, offered a model of life that balanced prayer and work, silence and word, solitude and community. The earthly existence of Saint Benedict was not without trials. He faced dark forces, both external and internal, in an era where the line between the sacred and profane was often blurred. The accounts of his miracles, especially the exorcisms, are testimony to his constant battle against evil. His unshakable faith, like rock, manifested an act of divine power, such as when a simple sign of the cross undid the poison destined to take his life. This miraculous act would inspire the creation of the medal of Saint Benedict, a symbol of protection against evil that endures to our days. Among the numerous miracles attributed to Saint Benedict, some stand out for their uniqueness and the divine power they imply. The poisoned bread. One account tells how on a certain occasion, perceiving that bread offered him was poisoned, Benedict ordered a crow that used to visit him to take the bread away where no one could find it. This act, beyond showing his dominion over nature, reveals his deep connection with creation and his divine protector, the immovable stone. In another episode, while building the monastery at Monte Cassino, an enormous block of stone that was necessary for construction could not be moved by the monks. It is said that Saint Benedict, upon praying over the stone, freed it from a demonic presence that was holding it, thus allowing the monks to move it without effort. This miracle not only underscores his spiritual authority over the forces of evil, but also his role as guide and protector of his community. Healing miracles. Saint Benedict's miracles also include numerous healings. It is narrated that with only prayer and making the sign of the cross, he cured a monk who was on the verge of death due to intense fever. In another case, he restored the ability to speak to a mute young man, thus showing the healing power of faith and intercession. Prophetic visions. Additionally, Saint Benedict had the capacity to foresee future events. He prophesied the destruction of his own monastery of Monte Cassino at the hands of the Lombards, a prediction that would be fulfilled many years after his death. These visions, far from being mere coincidences, are testimonies of his close communion with God and his capacity to see beyond the limits of human time. The last days of Saint Benedict's life were marked by the same devotion and surrender to God that characterized his earthly existence. As he approached the end of his journey in this world, his spirit prepared for the transition to eternal life, maintaining his faith and serenity unaltered before the proximity of death. At the threshold of his departure, Saint Benedict continued guiding and teaching his disciples, leaving them not only a spiritual wisdom, but also a living example of how to face the last earthly journey with grace and confidence in the Lord. It is told that 6 days before his death, Saint Benedict asked his brothers to dig his tomb, thus revealing his prior knowledge of the moment when God would call him to his presence. The account of his last days speak of how, despite the weakness of his body, his spirit remained vigorous, dedicated to prayer and in communion with God. Benedict spent his last hours in fervent prayer, standing, supported by his disciples in the monastery chapel, a testimony to his unshakable faith until the end. It is said that just before his death, he received the Eucharist, strengthening himself with the bread of life for his passage to beyond. The exact day of his departure from this world has been lost in history, but the Church celebrates his transit on March 21st, marking the day when his earthly light was extinguished to shine even brighter in the celestial kingdom. His body was buried in the monastery of Monte Cassino next to his sister Saint Scholastica, and the tomb he himself had ordered to be prepared, thus closing the cycle of his earthly life. The news of his death spread rapidly, bringing mourning and at the same time hope to those who had known and followed him. The miracles and protection associated with Saint Benedict did not end with his death. On the contrary, his intercession became even more palpable for the faithful, strengthening his legacy and extending his influence throughout the centuries. The death of Saint Benedict is remembered not as a moment of sadness, but as a celebration of his life and his ascent to celestial glory. His transit from this world to the Father reflects the culmination of a life lived in full consonance with divine will, a testimony of holiness that continues to inspire generations of Christians to seek God with all their heart, soul, and strength. Saint Benedict, through his life and work, became patron of numerous causes and protector against various adversities. His veneration extends throughout the world, especially in Europe and Latin America, where his legacy resonates strongly in the hearts of faithful. His influence transcends time and space, offering a model of holiness accessible to all, regardless of their state of life. The richness of miracles and episodes surrounding Saint Benedict's life not only highlights his holiness, but also serves as a source of inspiration and consolation for the faithful. Each miracle, each act of faith, each confrontation with evil reinforces the idea that divine presence acts through his saints, offering protection, guidance, and hope to humanity. The medal of Saint Benedict, symbol of his struggle against evil and his protective intercession, has become a reminder of his power and presence in the daily life of believers. Wearing it is an act of faith and a constant reminder of the commitment to live according to Christian principles, facing adversities with the strength and confidence that Saint Benedict demonstrated throughout his life. The story of Saint Benedict and his miracles continues to illuminate the path of faithful, showing that even in the darkest moments, the light of faith and divine love can work wonders, transforming lives and guiding souls toward holiness. His legacy is a beacon of hope, an eternal testimony of God's grace acting through those who surrender themselves completely to his will. Devotion to Saint Benedict and his rule remains alive, inspiring generations of monks, nuns, and lay people to seek God in the everyday life. In Latin America, his figure is especially beloved, invoked for his intercession in times of trial, and for his example as a guide toward a life of deep prayer and diligent work. His feast, celebrated on July 11th, is a moment of spiritual renewal and reaffirmation of Benedictine values of peace, prayer, and industriousness. With his earthly life marked by the tireless search for God, he invites us all to enter the path of faith with renewed fervor. He reminds us that in the midst of the tribulations and challenges of the world, the light of Christ can guide us toward ports of peace and serenity. May his story be a beacon that illuminates us, inspiring us to live with the same devotion and surrender to God, and to share, like him, the light of faith and divine love with the world. If you like this story, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to help us continue building this community. See you in the next episode of Sancta Sanctorum.